I'm going to be doing a little extra demo showing the ball with tail, both setup and animation. I've made a ball with a simple tail here using some polygon primitives, and for the most part I'm going to be working from the front view here. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be animating this ball and having the tail react to show some overlapping action. Right now, if I were to select just the ball moves independently of the tail here, and all these little tail sections that I built and put into place are independent. And so what that means is that it's going to be kind of difficult to animate. You could go and you could animate, you could drag select all of these objects, or you could shift select the objects and move them. But as you can see, if I were to rotate these objects, look what happens. Oh, okay, so they're not rotating in the way that I really want them to rotate. So I'm going to build a simple hierarchy, which is going to make animation and organization a lot easier. What we want to do is we want to go to Window, Outliner. The outliner is a window that shows all the assets, all the things that are in your Maya scene. And as you can see here, I have the body and the three tail sections, and they're kind of in order here as they were built. But what we want to do is we want to parent these tail sections to themselves and ultimately to the ball, which is going to be the top of the hierarchy. So first thing I want to do is I want to parent all of these objects, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to the bottom tail, tail 3, and I'm going to select it in the outliner, and I'm going to middle mouse click and drag it up to tail 2. And then I'm going to take tail 2 while it's selected and click and drag it up to tail 1, and take tail 1 and click it into the body there. So now if I were to see over here, there's a little plus next to here, and if I shift select it, it'll open up the hierarchy, and it'll show you what's parented. So the tail 3 is parented to tail 2 is parented to tail 1, and tail 1 is parented to the body. What this does is, if I just select just the ball and move it, all the tail parts will follow with it. Same thing if I were to rotate it, the tail parts will move with it. One more thing I want to do, and I'm going to close out this outliner because we don't really need it right now, is I'm going to change the pivot point of my little tail sections here. If I were to go rotate it like that, you can see where the pivot point is in the center of these cones here. Let's pick the bottom cone here, and you can see that it's pivoting from the center where it should be pivoting from basically the tip. So what I want to do is I'm going to change my pivot point for each one of these cone sections so they will pivot and rotate correctly according to how they're connected to the ball, like a chain here. So I'm going to take this top one, I'm going to select the top cone here, and I'm going to press D. And what that will do is that it'll give a little icon here. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to change this to the translate icon. And if I press D, if I press D and hold the D button down, I can move my pivot point to the tip. Did you see that? I'm going to move a little closer so you can see that. I'm going to press D, hold D key down, and I'm going to change my pivot point. Now, if I were to rotate this, you can see that it's rotating from the tip of the cone, and the cones underneath it are following. I need to do that to the other cones. I'm going to take cone number 2, press D, and move the pivot point to the tip. Move down, select the third cone, hold down D, and move the pivot point to the tip. Now all these pivot points are going to move from the tip of the cone, as it naturally would if it were connected to the ball. Okay, let's do a little animation now. So the goal of this animation is to move this ball back and forth using ease-ins and ease-outs, overlapping action, anticipation, follow-through, all that sort of good stuff. So I'm going to start with my ball. And I'm going to move my timeline down to about 100. I'm going to give myself 100 frames of animation here. And I'm going to start by selecting just the ball, which is called P body. And make sure I'm at frame 1 here. And I'm going to select the ball. I'm also going to go into my preferences first here, go into settings, animation, and I'm going to make my default tangents here in the tangent section to linear. They often will default to auto. I'm going to make sure that they are on linear for default in and default out tangent. And we're going to change this a little later, but I like to start with the linear tangents. Okay, so starting at frame 1 with just the ball selected, I'm going to just move it over to the left and keyframe by pressing S. And I'm going to keyframe the ball here at its starting position. I'm also going to hold it for 10 frames. I'm going to have it still for about 10 frames before I start the motion. Okay, so I'm going to press S for keyframing it at frame 10. So it's just sitting there for about 10 frames. Okay, so now I'm going to put in some anticipation. So I'm going to go to 15. I'm going to say 5 frames, and I'm just going to move it back a little bit, about like that, keyframe it. So it's going to anticipate back, and then I'm going to hold it for another 5 frames. Go to frame 20, keyframe it. So I go back, hold it for 5 frames, and now I'm going to move it to this other side here, other side of the frame here, in 30 frames. So I'm going to go to frame 50 in my timeline, and I'm going to move, and I'm going to move my ball with a tail here. I'm going to move it farther than I want it to go. And I'll show you in a second why I'm going to do that. And I'm going to keyframe it. Okay, so it's going to go for frame 50, and it's going to go about to there. Oh, and I'm going to move it back a little bit. I think it's going a little far. Now remember, the more distance you make your object travel in the set amount of keyframes, the longer the distance, the faster it's going to go. So in this case, it's going, it's going pretty fast. So I'm just going to keyframe it a little slow. Let's look at that. Let's just look at that, and I can test my motion here. Let's do a little test here. Okay, that's not too bad. Let's make it a little farther. I think it could go a little faster. Remember, I'm making it go farther. Okay, there we go. And then I'm going to go to frame 60, 10 frames, and I'm going to have it recoil back and keyframe it there. So this is what's going on here. Let's get in a little closer. The ball is holding. It's going to anticipate. It's going to hold. It's going to move to the opposite side of the frame. It's going to hit. It's going to overshoot, and then it's going to have a recoil back, and it will hold for however many frames. Let's just make that about 80. Okay. So let's take a look. Let's open up our graph editor. Where are you, graph editor? Animation editors, graph editor, and let's just take a look at that curve. And you can see here that since it's linear, it's going to have some sharp curves. And it gives it kind of a mechanical look. So if we were to look at this animation now, it's looking kind of stiff and mechanical, and we want to get rid of that. And we can do that by changing up our tangents in our graph editor.